Let's get started. My name is Giselle, and this is Slow Food Live. If you're not familiar with Slow Food is an international grassroots movement that began 30 years ago in Italy. The mission of Slow Food is good, clean, and fair food for all. We are present in many countries around the world, and there are over 150 chapters in the United States. Slow Food Portland among them, of which Katherine is a part. Slow Food Live is our way of bringing slow food into your home during this strange and very challenging time. I think more of us are cooking and gardening at home than ever before, frankly, and this is a great, if not odd, opportunity to really lean into what that looks like and find your way in your own kitchen, and hopefully find a slow food way in your own kitchen and in your yard and in the way you're sourcing your food. So welcome to Slow Food Live. If you haven't joined us before, welcome back if you have. I'm really happy to have Katherine Deumling with us today. She is a longtime member of Slow Food. She just shared with me that today she's been a part of Slow Food or somewhere around today for 20 years. So we have a slow food veteran on our hands, and she's modeling a cool 90s apron from a local pasta shop that we both love with some rogue snails on it. So I'm loving that. Katherine is a chef and the founder of Cook With What You Have, which I'll place a link in here in just a moment. Katherine, you have a really interesting history of how you came to cooking the way you do, where you grew up, where you learned to cook, where you studied cooking. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got here, and then we'll jump into your sauces. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We're really happy to have you and grateful for your time.
Thank you, Giselle. It is such a pleasure to be here. I can hardly stand it, and I know a whole bunch of my old slow food pals are on this call and webinar. So welcome to you all here in my little sunny kitchen in Portland. Oh my goodness, slow food was really has been my life and culinary education. And for 20 years, I found out about slow food, and when I did and realized how it connected my interest in different cultures, in people, in food, in politics, in systems, I couldn't believe such a thing existed. So I was just, I'm a little bit of an evangelist about slow food. So I joined Slow Food Portland, quickly became the chair of that group, and then worked my way through the slow food hierarchy, I suppose, until I was the chair of the Slow Food USA board in the maybe, I don't know, John, mid-2000s? I can't remember. I mean, yeah, I don't know, long time ago. So here I am. I love food. I love to eat. I love to feed people. I love to be in kitchens with people. I learn about, I feel like, people through food and the place. I learn about, and really slow food is what really integrated my work and passion working with farmers and getting closer to the source, and which also then expanded my understanding of why the systemic look, both from a biodiversity and cultural diversity and an equity perspective, was so relevant and so important to talk about. So to me, food is so much more than just what we put in our mouths and use to nourish us, and it is really, for me, a lens of how I look at the world and how I understand the world and how I feel like I can make change in the world and strive towards more justice in the world. So I need to stop because we have to talk about sauces too. So I, as Giselle mentioned, have a business called Cook With What You Have, which is it's really the home for anyone who wants to cook seasonally and have ideas of what they're growing in their garden, what they're getting out of their CSA, what they're getting at the farmer's market or any regular store, and know what to do with that with general parameters, not with a lot of you must do X, Y, and Z. So the whole point of Cook With What You Have, which I've been running for 11 years, is to give people permission and guidance. So permission to use whatever you have, and guidance to hopefully short circuit your learning a little bit and put my 40 years of cooking to play for you, so I can help you with some shortcuts and some tips and some sort of things that will make things taste good on the fly, really, because we should be able to pull something together quickly, even though this is slow food. It's never been about the crock pot. So it's really about that creative, joyful agency that I feel like comes with looking around, picking, the pieces, the bits and pieces that might seem totally random in your fridge, pantry, garden, and putting something on the table that's nourishing. It may not be the best thing ever, but it probably will do the trick. And you will get that extra sort of pride, at least that I get, or smug feeling, like you beat the system. Like you didn't go anywhere, you didn't spend any more money, you didn't waste any food, you used what you had. So we're going to apply that lens. So anyway, I have a business called Cook With What You Have. You should check it out, cookwithwhatyouhave.com. You also get a discount using discount code SLOWFOOD for 20% off, which means it's $4.99 a month. It's very affordable, I think. So you can check that out. But now we're going to talk about sauces. And I don't mean sauce and we're not going to the stove. These are all fresh, quick dressing / sauce / vinaigrette that can be used in a myriad ways. So, and we're going to kind of apply the Cook With What You Have principle to each one of these. And some of these I just sort of came up with over the years because I needed to use up something and they led to this sauce. And then I've expanded upon them. And some are more classic. So I think, and yes, please, Giselle said, I will try to stop after each sauce for questions so we don't get too far into this. Anything else I need to do, Giselle, before we get going?
Nope, this is great.
All right. So I'm going to start with what I think of as sort of a classic vinaigrette. This is something that I keep in I need to refill it. So today's demo is my perfect chance to refill my jar. I make this in a jar, and I do not get paid by Ball. I have no contact with Ball canning jars, but they have these new leak-proof lids that are a total godsend. They make my dressing jar experience way better. So if you are in the US and if you see Ball leak-proof jars, lids, get them. So I'm going to shake it up in the jar. So we're going to start with a little garlic. And I have a trick that I like to employ that uses my cutting board as kind of like a mortar and pestle. So because I don't want big chunks of garlic in my dressing, because the dressing is something you want to nicely, evenly coat whatever it is you're putting on. So if I have big chunks, it's annoying. So this is a very flat garlic clove, so it's not. So I have a clove of garlic here. And I'm going to mince it. I miss my knife sharpeners. I have had to sharpen my own knives and I'm not nearly as good as the guys I go to normally. So we've got our clove minced, not even terribly beautifully. And then I'm going to sprinkle some coarse salt onto the garlic. So which is for texture. We'll need it for flavoring too, but the point of it here is to provide resistance like you would in a mortar and pestle with that mortar. And then we're going to use the knife to make a paste. And I exert a lot of pressure on the side of the chef's knife, and I pull it towards me and keep doing that. I scoot the garlic back, I pull it, scoot it back, and as you can, well, I'll show you in a second. Now we have a lovely paste. If you have a garlic press, of course you can use that. And I just don't happen to have one. And you can also skip the garlic. When I'm in a hurry, I totally skip the garlic in this vinaigrette, but I really do like it. So now, you see we have a paste that I can just scoop up on the knife. So I start with that. Then I add a little Dijon. Again, if you don't like mustard, don't have it, don't worry about it. You can make a lovely vinaigrette with just vinegar, olive oil, salt, and pepper, or just salt, or lemon juice. You get the drift. Or if you have whole grain mustard, put in whole grain mustard. I have a little Dijon, so I'm going to do that. Then my favorite herb to add, which again is by no means a necessity, is thyme. I happen to have fresh thyme out of the backyard, my little herb garden. So I'm going to chop that up a little bit. Dried thyme works beautifully. If you were feeling creative, you could put in dill or tarragon or really most anything. A little bit of basil is wonderful. But thyme is my favorite for my classic. So, and I have lots of it. So there's the thyme. And now in a jar, it's also really easy to see without measuring your ratio of, the classic ratio is 1 part acid to 3 parts oil. So I'm going to use a red wine vinegar here, but you can use a variety of vinegars. Balsamic is a little sweet, so I wouldn't use the same ratio. I don't tend to use it. You would need to add more of another kind of acidity to get the balance. So I'm just going to pour this in. So that's probably a 1.5 tablespoons. And then I'm going to pour in oil so that it looks more, yeah, that's about 1/3 to 2, or yeah, 1 to 3. And then it's going to need more salt than we included with the garlic. It needs way more salt than you think. So quite a bit more salt and pepper. So that's everything. And then again, just a general note about vinaigrettes, and any dressing, you really want it to be stronger flavored than tastes appropriate when you're tasting it, because it is going to be coating all these much more neutral ingredients. So it needs to be really bright and quite salty, in my opinion. So I'm going to shake it up. This is where the leak-proof lid is so nice. And then I love doing this in a jar because then I also can just taste. I just taste out of the lid. Perfect. It's absolutely delicious. So I try to always have this on hand because I find that eating something quick that's really delicious and nutritious and helps me work through my vegetables and other things I might have in the fridge is made so much easier by having something like this just ready. Of course, you can buy a bottled salad dressing, but this is so much better. So there's my super standard, basic, with a few variations vinaigrette. So I don't just put this on greens. I put this on bowls of beans and roasted vegetables and maybe toasted seeds. It's delicious with anything with egg. So if you just have a couple hard-boiled eggs, I encourage people to, if they want nice convenient snacks during the week, hard-boil a bunch of eggs at the beginning of the week, and then you could just slice it in half, drizzle a bunch of this on top, sprinkle a few herbs, because maybe you have some in your garden, and on a piece of toast. It's fantastic. So I use this. You can add, leftover meats that you might add to salads would be delicious with this. Potatoes, you could use this as a dressing for a potato salad. You can use this as a dressing for a slaw and maybe add a little bit of heat, a little hot pepper, a little cumin would make a fantastic dressing for a slaw. So that is a little vinaigrette 101 and the sort of cook with what you have model. Giselle, do we have anything?
Yeah, one question. First, I want to say I'm with you on those lids. They're awesome. Also not associated with fall, but they really work. Emily is asking what type of oil you use. And you can talk a little bit about olive oil and what you go for there, or oil in general.
That's an excellent question. Yes, I'm sorry I didn't mention that. I use, this is a California olive oil that happens to be in an old wine bottle of a Slow Food member winery, and you can't even read the label anymore. So I use olive oil in all my vinaigrette, this type of vinaigrette, and it's my favorite. I mean, you can certainly use a more neutral oil. It's super fun to use a hazelnut or walnut oil for a special vinaigrette. Those go off really quickly, and I tend not to be able to afford them, so I don't have them on hand often. But yeah, I think olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, is wonderful.
Excellent. I think with a vinaigrette is really nice. Like I like Mediterranean olive oils because they're really fruity. They really taste like olive to me. And the California olive oil is fantastic. And I think, you can use any oil you have, right? Like whatever olive oil you have in your kitchen is going to be great. And then start to get used to what taste you might like. Is that right?
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And should your vinaigrette be refrigerated? And what's the shelf life in or out of the fridge?
Oh, yes. Excellent question. I do refrigerate mine. Of course, the ingredients, the oil and the acidity and the salt, those are all preservatives. So they are going to, by nature, keep pretty well all together. I tend to keep it in the fridge. So if you have room, keep it in the fridge. And what I do is as it gets low, I often don't want to wash that container because it's a pain. So I'll just refresh without washing the jar, because again, nothing in it is going bad or growing anything scary. So then, every couple of weeks I wash it. And as you saw, this morning's was a clean jar and start over. But it will do fine for 2 weeks or longer in the fridge. But I guarantee you, it won't last that long because you'll start putting it on everything. Or I guess that's my assignment to you is if you make it, try like before you eat anything, look in your fridge. That's going to be the case for all these sauces today and see what you have. And then just start putting it on stuff, even if it seems unconventional.
Totally. I had a piece of toast with goat cheese and vinaigrette from my fridge this morning. And it's one of my favorite things to eat. And I'm going to add a question to that. If it solidifies a little bit, is that okay?
I was actually just going to mention that, yes, it typically will, and the oil will separate off at the top, and then with a good shake or a stir of your spoon, or even just the warmth of your hand around that jar for a minute, it'll emulsify again and be dandy. So that's just a very typical temperature-related chemical reaction, nothing that's of any concern.
Perfect. And Ibti is asking, can I just take it out of the fridge and kind of let it soften up and it'll be okay on the counter for a few minutes?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between, or sort of the taste difference or the choice difference between vinegar and lemon?
Yes, all these things I wanted to mention. Thank you for excellent questions. So I'd use both. When I'm making these jars of vinaigrette that I keep on hand, I tend to use vinegar because it's less expensive. I don't have to worry about having fresh lemons on hand, which these days has gotten a little bit more tricky. Lemon is a little less acidic, so you need a little bit more of it, in my opinion, to get the right balance of acid. But again, that's going to depend on what you're dressing, what your palate is, what you like. So I should mention this again, tasting is so vital to any of this cook with what you have strategy, or any cooking. So we have to use our senses because every vinegar is slightly different, lemons are slightly different, and so are the oils, and so the way they interact, so that there aren't any perfect measurements or ratios. So often if I don't have time to make a vinaigrette, but would have a green salad for like this time of year with really tender greens, I will just do a squeeze of lemon, if I have lemon, and olive oil and salt and pepper. And that is perfection. So I often use lemon in salads like that. And as I said, I usually use vinegar here just because it's cheaper, it's more convenient. But it's absolutely, you can substitute lemon for what I just showed you totally, maybe add a little bit more and see what you think. I do think the lemon doesn't keep quite as well. So if you have herb, it just, the brightness fades a little bit differently than the vinegar does. So I think for longevity, I also prefer to use vinegar for that reason.
Excellent. That's a great tip. One last question before we move on to the next sauce, which is we're loving the cook with what you have approach and the flexibility of it. And I love that the permission statement you made, I think is really important to just kind of give it a shot. But are there sort of rules to what herbs and spices you put in with acids in terms of changing the color or even flavor? So I think like when you're combining an acid and an herb or putting an herb in any sauce, let's say, since I think you'll probably put some more in some more sauces, do you follow any sort of rules or?
It is a great question. It's going to come up in our green sauce that we're going to make shortly. Acidity is what degrades which is odd maybe, and maybe counterintuitive some, but the brightness of the greens. So when we get to the salsa verde that I'm going to make, or the green sauce, I'll recommend that you add the acid closer to the time when you're going to be serving, or if you're wanting to make a big batch, keep it out if you want that color integrity to stay. So lemon definitely will, it starts breaking things down. That's what acid does. So, and with that comes a color fading. And in terms of mixing and matching, I think just use your taste as your guide and what you have. I don't get too picky about what goes perfectly with another, because I find that it's so much goes so well together. And if you have fresh herbs and if you're making things out of whole ingredients, basically, you're not going to go wrong. So I would not worry about what kind of acid and what kind of herb you combine. I would try it and see what you like. But I think results generally with fresh herbs and spices are fantastic. And different cultures use them so differently. Like Persians use a lot of dried spices, dried mint, dried dill, dried parsley. I don't use as much dry. I use them fresh. But we have so much. There's no wrong answer.
Excellent. Perfect. Okay. And if you're ready, we can move on to the next sauce.
All right. So now we're going to use, it's another sort of dressing vinaigrette, but it's going to have miso and some yogurt in it. I don't know when and how I came up with this, but I make it and I love it, and it's quite different. So everything in my kitchen, I feel like, goes back to slow food in some form. I don't know if anybody is on, but Linda Caldwell, who was the Slow Food Portland chair not too long after I left, made this miso with a farmer from a farmer's chickpeas, who also went to Terra Madre years ago, Anthony Bouchard of Ayers Creek Farm. So I happen to have miso that Linda made in my fridge. I don't always, but it's super special, and I wanted to call out because it's a slow food call. So I'm going to put about, I have my recipe here, but I'm going to make slightly smaller versions than the recipes you're going to see because I'm going to have so many sauces in my fridge. So there's a dollop of miso. And thank you, Linda, for the miso, for chance you're on the call. And then I'm going to add some yogurt, which I'm sure is a super odd combination in any traditional sense, but I really like it. And if you didn't have yogurt, you could just do a little bit of cream or even a little bit of buttermilk. So I'm going to put in some yogurt. I'm checking what and let's see. I do have to remind myself what I say to do so that you can get the same recipes. Great. So there's some yogurt, and then we're going to add some mirin, which is sweet rice cooking wine. If you don't have mirin, a little bit of sugar added to like a sherry vinegar or even just some white wine, something that has a little bit of sweet and acidic flavor can be a substitute. So I'm going to put some mirin in here. And then I'm going to put some rice vinegar in here. And again, I'm not measuring. We'll just taste it. And this is maybe odd too. I'm going to add some cumin, some ground cumin. I really, really like a little bit of cumin here. So, and then you don't want to put much salt in the beginning because miso is so very salty, or is very salty. Got a lot of pepper, and then more olive oil. And I'm going to whisk this actually. Oh my goodness, it's really pretty. And then, I don't think you can see how pretty this is. I'm also going to add, where's my hot red pepper? There it is. I'm going to add a little heat. This is also red peppers from Ayers Creek Farm. So now I'm so curious to taste this. Oh, it smells so good. I wish you could smell it. I wish you were all in my kitchen with me. So here you have this, it emulsifies really easily because of the yogurt. You have this beautiful, oh my goodness, it's really complex. So here in just a few seconds, we made this dressing. And I find that you can make it thinner or thicker. My yogurt, if you use Greek yogurt, it would be much thicker and you need to thin it out. This is just plain whole milk yogurt. The miso, cumin, mirin, rice vinegar. And this is absolutely wonderful on just a green salad with some toasted seeds and nuts. It's wonderful on a rice bowl of sorts. Obviously, I mean, rice or chickpeas, or a combination of those things, or roasted vegetables. Let's try this. In anticipation of this demo, I roasted a bunch of squash. I had one winter squash left from my winter CSA. I've also been working on a project with Oregon State University and the Culinary Breeding Network about winter vegetables and recording videos on helping people get more familiar with winter vegetables. So we've been, there's a variety trial, or beyond that, it's already on the market, or a squash called Tetsu Kaboto, which is a squash common in Japan, and it stores incredibly well. So when I cooked this morning, it's May, it was perfect. So I roasted this because I thought any of the dressings we're making today, or sauces, would be delicious on squash, or they're a good foil to test. So I'm going to try this. Oh, it's fantastic. So here we had our miso dressing on roasted squash, and it tasted fabulous. So you could, if you were doing that particular dish, you could chop up a bunch of cilantro or mint, I would say, or basil or parsley, and drizzle the sauce over it, put the herbs on it, and maybe some toasted seeds, and you would have a wonderful meal. So all inspired by this dressing. So let's see, Giselle, should we check in about the miso, the creamy miso vinaigrette?
Yeah, let's check in about miso in general. Maybe you can tell us very briefly kind of what miso is, and the difference between red and white miso, and if chickpea miso, like, is there a flavor difference, and maybe just a little quick breakdown of miso for those that are unfamiliar.
Absolutely. So and I'm not a miso expert. I use it and love it, but it's not something I'm super well versed in. But it's a traditional Japanese, I don't want to say condiment, but ingredient that is incredibly versatile, and it is made traditionally by fermenting soybeans, sorry, but it is made with a variety of different beans. So chickpea is one of the other misos that I've had, and this one I think happens to be, but actually I was wrong. It's agate soy miso. It was made with soy. This is a soy miso. This, and so the different colors relate to, I believe, different lengths of aging, basically. There may be other bacterial variations, but I think mostly it has to do with age, and therefore has to do with intensity and strength of flavor. So the white and yellow misos are much milder, and then you get into the red misos and they're stronger. So another reason why you want to be tasting as you go, and why measurements are that useful, because your misos will all be slightly different in terms of saltiness and sort of umami and strength. I started buying the yellow miso because I don't know why. That's what I sort of began using, and it's very, very user-friendly and versatile. And I would recommend starting with a white or yellow and seeing what you like. It's wonderful just to stir into a vinaigrette like this, or a sauce. You can use it in marinades. Obviously, miso soups are traditional, and there are lots of fun ways to use miso. But it's a good thing. Many people have it in their fridges and forget about it if they're not sort of culturally embedded in using miso. So adding some we could have even added it to the vinaigrette we made earlier. It probably would have been delicious. Reduce the salt is the big thing. So before you add salt, and actually, I realized I didn't add any salt, and I don't think I would. So the miso is salty enough, and that'll vary again, that you wouldn't need any additional salt.
Excellent, great. And you mentioned to put it in the fridge, or people have it in the fridge, so we want to keep that in the fridge.
So this dressing you'd want to, oh goodness, I hope are those things blocking your screen, me?
Oh no, I can see you.
So yes, thank you. Keep it in the fridge. I'd say this about a week is what you want to do. It'll keep a little longer too, but yeah, keep it in the fridge.
Excellent. And with this recipe that you just showed us, can we use any kind of miso? Will the cumin go with any kind of miso?
And you're going to get a pattern here for me where I'm going to say always yes, always yes. Try it. I think so. And you can omit the cumin too. I like the combination, but by all means, taste it without, and then add a little bit, add more if you like. The black pepper and the cumin, I kind of do a bit of each, and a little bit of the hot pepper, and I love it. So yes, try it with any miso. Absolutely, whatever you have.
Yeah, and dare I say, with a different spice if you're so inclined.
Absolutely. And if you, I don't know, I'm not such an expert on dairy-free yogurts, but other kind of, anything that will lend a bit of a creamy quality to it. Of course, there's miso tahini sauces, which is something I also make, which you could just go that direction if you didn't have yogurt or didn't want to use yogurt. So yeah, lots of options.
Excellent. And then one last question on thinning or warming the miso. When it's kept in the fridge, it's pretty thick. I think by its nature, it's just kind of thick. So how do you break it up? You break it up in essentially preparing the sauce.
Yes, that's a good question. It tends to be thick, but it also breaks down very easily because it's finely textured. It's not a solid chunk. So it stirs up really easily. As soon as I added those other ingredients, and even if you didn't have a whisk, just with a spoon, it'll emulsify. And it actually helps emulsify something. So if you're making it in a regular vinaigrette, it will be like a mustard or something. It will emulsify very easily and very quickly.
Excellent. So there's really no need to warm it. That's perfect. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay.
About that one.
All right. Okay, this is fun. Okay, we are going to, let me make sure, we're going to move to, because I can tell by the time we may not get through all of what I had planned. So we're going to move to what I'll just call green sauce. We could do an entire hour on this. There are so many ways to make a green sauce, and sometimes you have something, let's say a grilled piece of meat or potatoes or eggs or something for which you want a sauce. So that's one reason to make a green sauce. For me, often the reason to make a green sauce is that I have random bits of herbs and greens that may be going bad and I don't want to waste. So a green sauce is a wonderful place to put them, and it gives them an entirely new life. It's delicious and then super versatile to use however you want. So whether you're coming at it because you have a specific recipe or dish in mind, or you're coming at it from the I don't want to waste these beautiful greens, or not so beautiful soon. So that's a way to make green sauce. So I think the way I got into this, I spent quite a bit of time in Italy at various points in my life, and a salsa verde, Italian salsa verde, there are many variations, but at its most basic is parsley, lemon, juice and zest sometimes, garlic, salt and pepper, or salt, not even pepper always, and olive oil and olive oil. And that alone, you don't need a food processor, you just chop it up. I better get chopping because we've got lots to do here. Is absolutely delicious. So you can think of that as your foundation. Is just those things. But if you wanted a fancy version, it can typically involve capers, some anchovies. You can even hard boil some eggs, separate the yolks and the whites, mash up the yolks with the garlic and the anchovies and capers and the denser items in the sauce, then stir in all the herbs, and then finally chop the whites and mix that in for an incredible, rich, much more complex green sauce, which is super fun. We're not going to do all of that today. Then now you can also vary what goes in it. So in ours today, I went in the backyard and I have sorrel, the French sorrel, not the red vein stuff. I hate the red vein stuff, don't plant it, it's a pest. And they're not botanically all that related. So I have some sorrel, which is nice and bright and tart, and I have some arugula. So I am going to chop up quite fine. And I'm not going to use a food processor because I don't want to make the noise and the mess right now. So we're going to do this all by hand. So this is the arugula and sorrel, which is quite tender. And this is going to be sort of a rough textured salsa verde because I'm not going to be perfect about it. And then we're going to add the parsley. So I'm showing you this not because you need to go out and find sorrel and arugula, if you have a little bit and you want a variation, it's perfectly suited to be added as well. And so here's our parsley. Try not to cut my finger right now with you all watching. So we have a good amount of, and I also have mint and cilantro here, which would be perfectly welcome too, but we're going to use those for other things. So now we have some of that. I also, I picked some tarragon this morning and a little bit of oregano and some chives. All of those would be welcome and fun. We're not going to add them right now. I happen to have green garlic out of my garden, which is just the immature garlic stalk where you can use much of the stalk. Eventually these will turn, if I had left it in the ground, these would have turned into a full head of garlic and individual cloves, which you can almost start seeing. But I love using green garlic this time of year and actually plant it to almost exclusively use in its green form. It's super tender and just has that wonderful garlicky fragrance, but is sweeter, more tender, so you can use it in greater quantity and in greater quantity raw without getting as much of a bite. So in this case, I'm going to add all this green garlic. So now we have some garlic. You can also add a little bit of shallot or a little bit of onion or a little bit of scallion. I happen to have some scallions, which I like that little bit of oniony bite. So I'm going to add a little bit of that as well. And you could do either the white or the green parts, and just a little bit. You don't need a ton. This is not an onion heavy sauce at all. And so I want to do lemon zest as well as juice. I love my microplane. I use it for ginger and lemon in particular. So I'm going to add a little bit of zest. And okay, and then we're going to cut that in half. Add the juice. And I like my green sauces to be quite bright, so to have quite a bit of lemon. But before you put in too much, taste it and see what you like. My husband is not much of a fan of my level of acidity. So now we're going to add salt, which I don't think we had yet. And olive oil. And some people make it much looser, so with a lot of oil, and some people use just enough oil to sort of bind it and have it be, I don't want to say paste because it's not that dense, but almost more like a fine salad. So depending on how you're going to use it, you can do more or less oil. So, oh, again, I wish you could smell this. It's the most amazing smell. So I don't know how well you can see it. I didn't do a ton of oil, but if you were to dollop this on, again, any kind of beans or grilled meats or eggs, it would just be amazing like this. Also, if you're cutting it finer or if you're using a food processor, it will get more liquidy because you're breaking down the fibers of the herbs more finely. So I would recommend not over processing it if you're using a food processor. I like a little bit of texture, but that's a preference. That's a preference as well. So let's taste this. It's so good. So all those fresh herbs. So now I want to talk about an interesting, quick variation. If you were to do it, and especially if you're using a food processor, you can kind of quickly go from, in your mind, a sauce like this, that I call green sauce, to a pesto. Not pesto necessarily in a conventional sense, but pesto where you would add nuts and possibly cheese. And a pesto for me would have less acidity, maybe just a little tiny bit, and it would have the nuts and the cheese, or just the nuts. So I often make a sauce, and especially these days I've been doing it where I want something a little bit richer, but I don't need the cheese. So I always keep nuts on hand. And these are toasted almonds, which is what I happen to have. So you could either grind these fine in the food processor, or I have a little hand grinder actually that I love. Where is it? Well, a family member put it not in the right place. I'll blame them. Oh, it's right here. I already took it out. It's falling. So this is the little hand grinder that I use for nuts, in case any of you have this. So you could add ground nuts to this, or do the whole thing in a food processor and have a richer, creamier sauce that can be used in different ways. That, yeah, it's just a nice variety. So I wanted to mention that. So Giselle, let's check in with questions on the green sauce.
There are actually no questions on this one so far.
All right. Then we can keep moving because I have many more sauces I want to make.
Perfect. We'll keep rolling.
All right. We are going to, let's see. We're going to roll to peanut sauce. We're going to make a totally right turn to a completely different kind of sauce. So I'm warming a little water here. It's a little bit loud. Okay. So I had anticipated having limes for this peanut sauce. Well, my little corner produce market didn't have limes because of Cinco de Mayo, supposedly, and other supply chain issues. So we don't have limes, which is perfect because it gives us a good opportunity to talk about how to approach this situation where you might want a peanut sauce. I had already thought about, or in the recipe I'm sending you, referencing peanut sauce or tahini or a mix of both. And of course, tahini is more commonly coupled with lemon than lime. So I think we're going to do part peanut butter, part tahini, and we're going to use lemon juice because that's what I have. I didn't have any lime juice. So the other things it's going to have are, where's my microplane? My microplane is going to taste a little bit like lemon still, but that's okay. Ginger. So for this, I like to make a quick peanut sauce that includes, the two fresh things it includes are garlic and ginger. And I don't know if you all know the ginger peeling trick with a spoon, where you just take the spoon, and I find the easiest way to peel ginger. So we have a little peeled section there. And we're going to use that microplane again and grate it into the bowl. And you can use a lot of ginger, not so much ginger. You can skip the ginger in a pinch. So there's our ginger. While I have the microplane, I'm going to just grating the garlic is really convenient too. I could use my little mashing technique that I showed you earlier, but the microplane will be fast and I have it all ready. So here's our, so we have, all right. So now we have garlic and ginger grated nice and fine. So you really do want to break those down so that the sauce itself eventually is fairly emulsified and smooth and doesn't have big chunks of either in it. So now we have that. Now we're going to add peanut butter and tahini. So I'm going to do a little bit of each. This peanut butter has separated a bit. Give that a stir. So I'm just eyeballing all of this. And I really encourage you, it is such a pain to measure things like peanut butter and tahini, and you have more dishes and it's just more of a mess. So I, by all means, encourage eyeballing and tasting rather than a lot of measuring. And again, you might not want a whole lot. You might want to start with a little bit. So measurements, and this, I think I'm just going to pour. So here's tahini. My co-op is actually packing because they sell it in bulk, and during COVID, they've been pre-packing these, so I'm still getting my sort of bulk tahini. So now we have that. So instead of the lime juice, we're going to do lemon. See if I have any left from my green sauce lemon. So we're going to need more than that for sure. And because of the richness of the tahini and the peanut butter, you definitely need a good amount of acidity. And we're going to add some rice vinegar as well, which is acidic, but also has a little more mellow sweetness to it. So we're going to do some of that. And some soy sauce. You could also add fish sauce if you wanted in the more peanut sauce trajectory. And let's see. And then if any of you have made sauces with tahini in particular before, you'll know that tahini seizes up and gets quite thick when you add other ingredients to it. So that's where, again, eyeballing and adding I add hot water to get the consistency I want if it has seized up quite a bit. So this is looking great. I would also typically add some hot pepper. So we're just going to keep using the same hot pepper here. You can make it not spicy at all, add lots of spice. Oh yeah, you can see how thick this is. This wouldn't drizzle very well or even be thin enough to dip salad rolls in or anything like that. So we're going to add a bunch of water, or some water, a little bit at a time. So let's see. So I warmed a little water here. The warm water just softens it more quickly. And then whoops, it gets much lighter in color as you add water. If you've made a sauce with tahini, you're familiar with this. And it can splatter a lot. So add a little bit at a time and integrate it well. And then add a little bit more. Okie doke. So we're gonna taste this now, and I'm really curious because my guess is it's gonna need some more salt, or some salt. We just added soy sauce in the salt category, and it's gonna need more acidity because I find that usually that's the case. So let's try this. Oh, it's really good. It's really, really good. Wow, I think maybe a tiny bit more acidity, but it's, whoops, squirting everywhere. But it is quite, maybe a tiny bit of salt. It is very close to perfect. Well, perfect is a silly word. But, so here we have this sauce. And I've, for years now, thought of peanut sauce or this kind of a sauce much more loosely than just salad rolls or traditional Thai uses of a peanut sauce with chicken skewers or things like that. So I just, honestly, a bowl of hot steamed rice with this and some cilantro and maybe some toasted peanuts on it, oh my goodness. It's like incredible comfort food to me. Or drizzled on that same squash that we looked at a minute ago, or again, it's just so delicious. So any pocket of leftover rice will be completely transformed with this on top of it. Giselle, we have some questions?
Awesome. That sauce looks really delicious.
So good.
I love a good tahini sauce. A long time ago, I found a recipe that put a tahini sauce on squash, on like a winter squash, and that got me onto a whole different trajectory with tahini, which I use a ton of. So one question about the tahini is, do we want to refrigerate it after you open it?
You know, I do. There may well be differing opinions about this, but I do, yes. I mean, tahini is tricky. Depending on the type, it can get really hard and crumbly and separated, so it's less easy to use. I find more and more, and I do have to say a shout out to the Soom tahini brand. I do think they're wonderful. And theirs is always really easy to use and really nice and smooth. But this from my co-op is also delicious. So yes, refrigerate, and ideally jars that don't look like they're super hard as a rock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also refrigerate mine, and I also love the Soom tahini. I've been eating tahini my whole life, and it's the best I've ever had because it's so smooth like that, which makes it easier to mix in. So keep an eye out for that. I'll add a little link here. And one thing I like to look out for too is age. Like if it seems like it's been on the shelf for a long time, it's probably going to be a little bit more separated.
Exactly.
I also keep mine in the fridge. It seems to stay together a little more. And then there's a lot of questions about vinegar. So the difference between rice vinegar, white wine vinegar, other vinegars, and when you use which ones?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. And again, I think stocking this rice vinegar, this is the really common brand, but there are much fancier brands that are probably better. But I use this, and I think rice vinegar has this wonderful, let's just taste it on its own. It has a unique, well, it's nice and bright, yet it's a little bit softer than some, and it's super versatile. And you can use rice vinegar in my vinaigrette from the very beginning. So you could use white wine vinegar in this peanut sauce and you'd be fine. So I do, if you're at the store and you're thinking about stocking a vinegar, I find having like a rice vinegar, a red wine vinegar, cider vinegar, those are the three I use the most. And different cultures and different styles of cooking you might have very different ones you use. But if you're sort of contemplating some basics, I like that combination. Those three I use a lot. But in this sauce, I mean, I haven't made it with red wine vinegar, but it would be fine. And, you know, especially if you do have the lime, that's going to counter it, and you wouldn't need very much of it. And you can skip the vinegar entirely and just use lime juice in this sauce. Absolutely, lime or lemon juice. The lemon juice worked great. It tastes absolutely fabulous. And I think you would taste it and you wouldn't be able to tell, is this peanut sauce? Is this sesame? Like, it's just got that lovely, rich, sauce taste to it. So there you go.
Perfect. And one more question, because there's definitely a desire to get you moving on so we can see as many recipes as possible. Like, enough of me. Can we use a different nut butter if there's a peanut allergy in the house?
Yes, and I meant to mention that. Do all sesame by all means. I have not worked a lot with cashew butter, but I hear it's great in this kind of an application. So I'm very familiar with sesame. Almond butter, if it's nice, it's nice and fine, would work well as well. So, and then I think things like sunflower butter would be actually maybe a really good substitute in this case.
Great, perfect. All right.
All right, let's move on to one more sauce quickly. And this is, I think I made this sauce so long ago, and it became something I used as an example of the cook with what you have sort of method and approach, which is that I had some cilantro in the fridge that was not looking so good anymore, which cilantro, as you might know, can quickly do. So I had this half bunch of wilting cilantro. This is lovely and fresh, and I thought, I don't want this to go to waste. And so what I did was I chopped up, I always, with cilantro, use the stems as well. They're very, very tender. You never need to throw them out. Even if you're adding cilantro to a salad, if you just chop the stems really fine and the leaves a little coarser, which is easy to do, you just grab the bottom of the bunch that's the stems, and you do those nice and fine. They won't be bothersome, and they add a lovely little texture. So don't pick cilantro leaves off their stems. It's a waste of time. And they're delicious. And cilantro is also a blood sugar regulator, and cilantro is amazing. So I chopped the stems really fine. So we're going to put the stems in a bowl, and then I'm going to chop the leaves, which still have stems attached, but you don't have to be precise at all. And actually for this sauce, I'll chop a little finer than I would if I was just scattering these on a dish or adding them to a salad. So I just, in those, however many years ago I came up or did this. So I have all the cilantro. And then all I did, back to the yogurt, I always have whole milk plain yogurt on hand, just because I find it incredibly useful for sauces, for balancing, that cool acidity that yogurt can bring. So I put a bunch of yogurt in, and again, the ratio doesn't matter at all here. You could have lots of cilantro and a tiny bit of yogurt to just pull it together. Or you could have more like a raita, where it would be lots of yogurt with a little bit of cilantro. It's sort of like a raita without cucumber, but herbs instead. So I put a bunch of yogurt in. Since I have all this beautiful mint from the garden, I'm gonna add some mint, because yogurt, mint, cilantro, they all go together nicely. And you probably guessed it, this needs garlic, but since I have this lovely green garlic stem still sitting here, instead of peeling a new clove, I'm going to add the green garlic. And since the green garlic is so tender, I don't worry too much about having little pieces of it in there, unlike a mature clove of garlic. So in goes the green garlic. You can see we have a lovely assortment of things here. And a little bit of lemon, again, or a little bit of vinegar. And not much, just a tiny bit, not like you would add for any of the other dressings we've done. We just want just a little bit. The yogurt's already tangy. Then add a little bit of olive oil if you want. You wouldn't have to. My knives are just not as sharp as I'm used to. So, oh my goodness, I wish I had you here again. So this, again, could be thinned out much more, or left a little bit thicker like this. I can't wait to taste this. Oh my goodness. Oh, salt. Oh, the importance of salt. Yeah, that will change things totally. So here we have a sauce that's really thick and very herb heavy. Let's see. Oh my goodness. So this sauce that came about just with wilted cilantro, yogurt, garlic, little lemon, and salt. I can't remember what it ended up gracing that particular day, but all I wanted was more of the sauce. So I looked around and just found things to put this on because it's so good. Again, that's why having that roasted winter squash here, we'll try it, is convenient as a foil for any of these sauces. Oh my goodness. The sweetness of the squash with the tartness and the brightness of the herbs, amazing. So I'm trying to think of, you could put this in a taco, in a fish taco, in any kind of taco. It's thick enough, you could spread it and it could be on a sandwich or an open-faced piece of toast, this, maybe some sliced beets, tomato when that starts happening again. You could literally dip any kind of bread in it, or toast or crackers. You could also put it on a bowl of roasted vegetables and beans or leftover meats or grilled meats or roast chicken. I mean, literally this can go on anything. So, and you can, any mix of herbs, it's basically like the green sauce we did earlier, but with yogurt. And is that really the only difference? I also like adding some hot pepper to this. Yes, a baked potato, that would be brilliant. I see someone on chat suggested putting this on a baked potato. Absolutely. Roasted potatoes, potato salad. This is your potato salad dressing right here. I would add a bunch more green onions if you were putting it on, making it into a potato salad dressing. This could be thinned out and be a dressing for cabbage, a slaw with anything like that. So we're running out of time. So I am going to be quiet and see what you have for me.
That's great. That looks delicious. I really love putting a sauce like that, like a yogurt herby sauce on like a stew, any tomato or chickpea, like a thick stew, a big slop of that on there is my favorite thing. But I'm with you. It can go on just about anything. If you all have any other questions, throw them in your Q&A. We will keep Katherine as long as she's willing to stay with us. So I do want to mention, since we're getting close to the hour, and I know that some of you will need to take off and attend to your other responsibilities, I want to mention that Katherine has a subscription, a seasonal recipe subscription that is really fantastic. So you can cook through the seasons with Katherine and get some guidance and permission, as she mentioned earlier there. So I'll throw the link in here, and I want to encourage you to check that out and check out what else Katherine has online. And we will send you these recipes in a follow-up email and links to all of those things with the code to get the 20% off that she mentioned earlier and all of that. So do take a look at that when you have a chance. And I will ask these last couple questions before we let you go. Rachel got vanilla whole milk yogurt at the store. I have had the same experience where I keep going. I always have like 3 quarts of whole milk yogurt in my fridge because I think, addicted to it. But I am finding that it's kind of hard to get right now. Is there any sort of sauce we can throw a flavored yogurt into, or what would your suggestions be around that?
Oh, that happened to me once a long time ago where I ended up with vanilla. It was so annoying. Oh gosh, with a sweet one like that, I haven't experimented for a while, and you would probably have to just, and with salt and acid, try to counter that. It would, depending on the brand, it could be tricky and you could end up wasting a bunch of ingredients. So I'm not sure I have a great recommendation for that. That's a tough one. Maybe use it in its sweet form.
Yeah, it really ends up being very sweet. So maybe on your morning oatmeal or something like that can.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I think that's a tricky question. And I'm with you, Rachel, on trying to get that plain whole milk yogurt. Let's see, we'd love to know if she has a brown sauce. We're going on a stir fry. Any sort of suggestion for a stir fry type sauce?
Oh yes, that is a great one. Yes, I think I can run through that pretty quickly. So what I would do, like my son loves teriyaki anything. So I make a sort of teriyaki sauce that can double as that and be made a little less sweet. So I like to use fresh orange juice if I have it. If not, a little bit of lemon juice and a little bit more sweetener. And then I do use a little bit of sherry vinegar or any kind of vinegar, ginger, garlic, a little bit of brown sugar, and soy sauce in a good quantity, like quite a bit of soy sauce, and a little sesame oil, toasted or not, depending on how much flavor you want. And so if you stir all that together, and then you can make a little cornstarch slurry or some starch, or a tapioca, but I use cornstarch. And just, if you want that sort of glazed, slightly thicker sauce, you can add a little bit of that mixture that I just mentioned, the soy sauce and the juice, and you can thin it with water too. So you use all those ingredients. So let me say again: ginger, garlic, citrus juice, sugar, soy sauce, water, and some sesame oil. And then just take, for just a small amount, you would take like a teaspoon or two of cornstarch and stir that into a little bit of water or a little bit of the sauce you just made, and so make a slurry, because the cornstarch won't, if you add the cornstarch to the whole thing, it will be clumpy. And then add it to those ingredients, and then you can add it to your stir fry and it'll cook. You'll want to cook it for just a minute or two. It'll come together, get a little bit thicker, and cook out if you added some starch. But you can also use that sauce without thickener over stir-fried vegetables or meats, and it's really delicious.
Excellent, perfect. I want to honor your time, Katherine, and let you go at the hour. So please stay tuned, you guys. Check out Katherine. She's on Instagram and Facebook at Cook With What You Have. Both pages, I believe, are just that, with no spaces. And again, I'll send that follow-up email with these recipes and links to her social media and website and that recipe collection. So keep up with Katherine at Cook With What You Have. Keep up with us at Slow Food USA. If you're in the Portland area, definitely keep up with Slow Food Portland. It's a really wonderful chapter. And if you have more questions, get on to some more cooking demos or join Katherine's subscription program. Katherine, thank you so much. This has been so fun. And suddenly I'm very hungry, so I'm gonna go get some lunch inspired by you. I really appreciate your time and being with us here today. So thank you so much for joining us.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you all.